On August 5, 2025, President Trump unleashed his most audacious threat yet, a crippling 250% tariff on the one thing that keeps nations alive: pharmaceuticals. The move was billed as the ultimate weapon to force down drug prices and bring manufacturing home. But instead of bringing allies to their knees, it triggered a global firestorm. As markets reeled, the European Union and Canada didn't just panic, they quietly exposed a fatal flaw in Trump's plan. The president's economic nuclear option had backfired spectacularly. How did a high-stakes bluff to control medicine risk breaking the entire global health system? For over half a century, the global pharmaceutical industry was a testament to Western cooperation. The United States, Canada, and Europe built a deeply integrated system based on shared research, complex supply chains, and a common goal: advancing human health. This partnership led to some of humanity's greatest medical breakthroughs, from vaccines to life-saving cancer treatments. It was a fragile ecosystem built on trust, where a key ingredient made in Ireland could be shipped to a facility in Canada to be formulated into a pill that would save a life in America. But a deep resentment has been festering in the United States for years, centered on one glaring fact: Americans pay, by far, the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. This created a potent political grievance, one that Donald Trump harnessed with his America First ideology. The narrative was powerfully simple: America, the engine of global pharmaceutical innovation, was being ripped off. Allies in Canada and Europe, he argued, were freeloading, benefiting from US research while using their government-run health systems to negotiate lower prices. The spirit of cooperation was reframed as a story of American exploitation, setting the stage for a leader who promised to smash the system and force the world to pay its fair share. On August 5, 2025, President Trump deployed what he believed was his economic nuclear option. He announced a plan to levy staggering tariffs on all imported pharmaceuticals, a move unprecedented in modern history. The threat was designed for maximum shock value. The tariffs would start small, he said, but would systematically escalate over 18 months to an astronomical 150%, and finally, a crippling 250%. The stated goal was to spark a great American industrial rebirth. By making imported drugs prohibitively expensive, the administration argued it would force Big Pharma to abandon its global supply chains and bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. It was the ultimate America First promise, reshoring a critical industry and, in theory, creating a self-reliant nation no longer dependent on foreign countries for its life-saving medicines. It was a direct assault on the globalized model that had defined the industry for decades. This tariff threat was the stick in a two-pronged attack. The carrot was a parallel policy push for what the administration called most favored nation pricing. This rule would require Medicare to pay no more for prescription drugs than the lowest price paid by any other developed nation in the world. The combination was meant to be an inescapable vice. The tariffs would punish companies for making drugs overseas, while the pricing rule would punish them for overcharging Americans at home. The rhetoric was populist and powerful, aimed directly at voters furious over the cost of healthcare. Trump framed it as a heroic battle against a corrupt system, taking on both foreign governments and pharmaceutical giants. The 250% figure wasn't just a policy proposal. It was a threat so immense, so reality-distorting, that the White House believed it would force the entire world to capitulate to its demands immediately. It was a high-stakes bluff intended to shatter the old order and remake the global health economy in America's image. The initial shockwave hit the markets exactly as intended. In Europe, a wave of panic selling erupted. The continent's main healthcare stock index plunged, and pharmaceutical giants saw billions wiped from their value in hours. The threat was being taken very, very seriously. But while investors panicked, officials in Brussels, Ottawa, and Canberra began to strategize. Instead of folding, they quietly armed themselves with the one thing Trump's strategy had ignored: the facts. The European Union was the first to expose the fatal flaw in the plan. Officials quickly pointed out to the media that under existing, legally binding trade agreements between the US and the EU, the maximum allowable tariff on branded pharmaceuticals was capped at just 15%. Even more critically, generic drugs, the affordable backbone of modern medicine, were exempt from tariffs altogether. Suddenly, Trump's 250% nuclear option was exposed as a dud. It was a masterful countermove, using the stability of the rules-based order to defang Trump's chaotic threat. Canada, whose pharmaceutical industry is deeply woven with that of the US, quickly aligned with the EU's position. Canadian officials emphasized that the integrated supply chain for medicine wasn't a vulnerability, but a strength that ensured patients in both countries had access to the drugs they needed. They warned that any disruption would lead to dangerous shortages. The concern went global when Australia's health minister voiced grave concerns, warning that the move could shatter the entire global health supply chain, impacting every nation on Earth. The United Front was clear. This wasn't just a trade dispute. It was a reckless act that threatened global public health. By calling his bluff, the Allies had successfully reframed Trump not as a strong negotiator, but as an erratic leader willing to gamble with people's lives for political points. This strategic countermove triggered a political meltdown in the White House. The president was now caught in his own trap. His signature threat, the 250% tariff, was legally unenforceable without him taking the even more drastic step of blowing up all existing US trade treaties. He was left holding a weapon that had been disarmed in public. While a 15% tariff is not insignificant, potentially adding billions in costs to the industry, it was a pale shadow of the earth-shattering blow he had promised. It was nowhere near enough to force a mass exodus of manufacturing back to the US. Having staked his reputation on this audacious move, Trump was left fuming, unable to execute his threat and unwilling to admit defeat. He had started a fight he could not win, even though the 250% tariff was exposed as a bluff. The remaining threat of a 15% duty and the sheer chaos of the announcement inflicted real damage. For a Canadian pharmaceutical company that specializes in producing active ingredients for drugs sold in the US, the instability is poison. Long-term investment decisions worth millions are put on hold. Do you expand your facility, or do you wait to see if the US will tear up another trade rule? This uncertainty freezes progress and puts high-paying, skilled Canadian jobs at risk. In Europe, the fallout was immediate. The stock market plunge wiped out billions in value for companies like Bayer, impacting everything from employee pension funds to the company's ability to fund research and development for the next generation of life-saving drugs. The potential for a 15% tariff, which could cost the industry up to $19 billion, forces companies to make hard choices. That money has to come from somewhere, and often it's the R&D budget that takes the hit. The ultimate cost is measured in the cures and treatments that may now be delayed or never discovered. The policy intended to lower drug prices for Americans was always destined to do the exact opposite. Even a 15% tariff on imported medicines or their key ingredients doesn't get paid by foreign companies. It gets passed down the supply chain until it lands on the American consumer. For a senior on a fixed income, even a small increase in the monthly cost of their heart medication or insulin can be devastating. This is the real-world consequence of the trade war, a direct tax on the sick and the elderly. Furthermore, the idea of making all drugs in the US is a dangerous fantasy. The modern pharmaceutical supply chain is a global marvel of specialization. A single pill can have ingredients that come from 5 different countries, each chosen for its expertise and efficiency. By threatening that system, the tariffs create the very real risk of drug shortages. If a tariff makes it too expensive to import a key ingredient from Canada or the EU, a US factory could be forced to halt production. This means American patients could suddenly find that the medication they rely on is unavailable at any price. The policy designed to make America self-reliant would, in reality, break the finely tuned system that keeps its pharmacy shelves stocked. It was a self-inflicted wound that risked the health of the very people the president claimed he was fighting for. A president's audacious bluff designed to weaponize medicine for political gain has backfired, exposing the limits of unilateral power. It was met not with surrender, but with a calm, strategic defense of the global order by America's closest allies. The standoff has fractured the trust that underpins the global health system and left the world's most critical supply chains hanging in the balance, threatening patients and progress everywhere. In the race to define the future, will North America win together, or will both nations lose by trying to go it alone? Are you American or Canadian? Share your story and your perspective in the comments below.